Good evening, heathens and heretics, and welcome to another episode of In the Abyss podcast. You may be wondering if this is the right podcast. Well, you're in the right place. This week, the voice of reason and myself get to enjoy the sweet taste of liberty and freedom as we have escaped the shackles of our benevolent and semi-divine leader, Joey Tregenza. Now, you may well be wondering where he is, and we'd like to tell you that, but that would be incriminating ourselves. Let's just say that all tyrants meet their end, and although knowing our luck, just like Napoleon, he's probably going to sneak back onto a ship, flee the island we exiled him on, and end up back here next week with an army behind him. Just like Wellington, we'll probably put our foot in it. Some of you may also be thinking, did that Motley Crue single from last week really tip him over the edge? Who knows? We don't know. We haven't heard from him. Anyway, in today's episode, all vetoes are null and void. So dream theatre yourself to death as far as we care. And we're going to go to this week. We're going to start with, because Tregenza's not here, the things that you always wanted to know about Tregenza, but were afraid to ask. Voice of Reason, how's it going?
Yeah, great. I'm not sure what I can follow that up with, to be honest. that was quite impressive. I feel there's stuff there that's ready to be brought out into the open, and things that need to be said.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've known Tregenza for a long time, and like we literally know where the bodies are buried. I mean, and there are a lot of bodies, and buried in various places, you know, and that's probably best left alone, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he did live on the in the middle of Bodmin Moor for a couple of years, didn't he?
Well, and that's exactly. And I only went up to his house up there once. And I think that was deliberate because it was really weird, right? It was down this like long country lane, you know, it was a secluded bungalow. God knows what happened up there. I mean, the other thing as well, the thing that really interested me, the only time I went there, and I think it was before Download 2005, was there was a herd of cows in the field outside his back garden, and he had some kind of weird occult power over those cows. He could almost like summon them to his hedge. It was very weird. Anyway, things you wanted to know about, you know, Tregenza, but were afraid to ask. I'm sure our listeners have got a lot of questions, but I've come up with 10 things that I think would shed light on his dark and twisted soul, basically. So firstly, the most interesting thing, and not many people know this, is that Tregenza actually ran guns for the Viet Cong in the 60s as part of a CIA operation, and that the film Air America with Mel Gibson is loosely based on his time there. So that's semi-autobiographical. And also that Tregenza is actually one of the few people that can tell the difference between butter and I can't believe it's not butter. It's
no.
It's an eerie behavior. It's eerie. Like he just knows. He intrinsically knows when it's butter and when it isn't. And I think that also seeps into his taste in music. Well, I mean, you went to university with him. You know what he's like. Number 3 is that Tregenza actually owns at least 3 holiday homes that we know of in Cornwall, but he refuses to rent them to locals because he's a gatekeeper. Literally, he sets up gates. He doesn't let people move in. He's like, and they're like, but we're homeless. He goes, don't get into the housing crisis with me, okay? Number 4, Tregenza doesn't navigate by the stars. The stars navigate by him, which I thought was quite interesting. Tregenza doesn't read books. He just stares them down until he gets the information he wants. Number 6, Tregenza was incensed by Jethro Tull winning the Grammy instead of Metallica, so he had them kidnapped. To this day, they're still chained up in the basement of one of his holiday homes. I mean, when was the last time you ever heard of Jethro Tull? I mean, where did they go? Tregenza knows. Number 8, this is quite pertinent to me. Tregenza never needs permission, ever. Number 9, if you feed Tregenza after midnight, he turns emo. I was quite surprised at that. I don't know what happens if you get him wet. I mean, do like other little Tregenzas pop out? I mean, no one knows.
No, it's a side party.
And the last one is Tregenza is what really killed the dinosaurs. So there you go. 10 things you always wanted to know about Tregenza but were afraid to ask. And dream theatre.
I mean, please enjoy this episode because this is the last time that we're going to be let loose on this between us. So
I don't think it will. I think if numbers go up because of this, then we've got some ground to stand on and be like, listen, you're obviously not the be all and end all of the podcast, and like I said, tyrants meet their end. So the things that we're not allowed. I mean, if the listeners to this podcast knew about the constraints that were placed on us before the start of every episode, it's like that book, the Roald Dahl book, Matilda. He is fucking Trunchbull. He's got a wardrobe in his office full of spikes. It's like an Iron Maiden. He puts us in it. We're not allowed to talk. I can't be shackled like this. So today I
got nothing.
So have you been listening to anything this week?
Have I been listening to anything this week? It's weird because it's I mean, obviously we've got the old very gradual metal journey I'm on, so I'm dipping into stuff, more older stuff that I sort of tried out gradually here and there. So I think I made a point of saying I'm really getting into Morbid Angel, and they're a band that really took a while to click, but when they did, they really did. And I sort of finally given the second album, Blessed Are the Sick, a go. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think Damnation's is it Domination
Sorry?
What's the album that a lot of people regard as the seminal one? Is it Domination?
The seminal one is the seminal one is, well, I would say from what I'm aware of, is the debut, Altars of Madness. Which it didn't click at all the first time I listened to it. It was weird, but Bean made a comment about guitars being played backwards, and it just, something clicked after that. And it's very good. It is quite technical. It weaves and twists and whatnot. And the second album is heavier and darker, but I can absolutely see where they went well.
They're definitely a band. They're definitely a band that shouldn't be overlooked. You need, if you're into metal, you should definitely give them a go.
Yeah, this is the thing. We all talk about obituary and death and whatnot, and certainly to a certain extent Dayside. But I think maybe the association with that stuff maybe put some people off, because I think there's more going on with their sounds and their music. But it is difficult to get into. It's not immediately accessible, but it's one of those bands where, like I say, for me, once it clicked, it became very accessible, which might sound weird.
Yeah, but that's the problem with. It's not a problem. It's something that you need to be wary of when I think with death metal, because it is very rarely do I listen to death metal, with the exception of Death. When I just straight away go like this, because it's so easy to just look at it at the surface level and go, no, I can't hear the lyrics, it's growling, or the guitars are too distorted, or I can't pick out riffs, and I'm not going to listen to it. I don't like it. So, there's a lot of there's quite a few bands that you need to kind of have the patience with. And then there are, and this is my problem with death metal a lot of the time, is there are a lot of bands where it's difficult to get past that surface bit because there's not a lot of substance underneath. Whereas bands like Morbid Angel, there is substance underneath. There is Obituary are the same, Death are the same. And I'm not an expert on death metal by any means, so it's definitely something that you need to kind of give the time. Same with Carcass as well, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how I've approached it, really, because I mean, as we said, the death metal fan base on social media is pretty sizable, but I'm really enthusiastic, and it's kind of bitten me. And there were 2 or 3 releases last year I really enthused about, but it feels like, I want to get it properly, and that's why I'm having to go back and start from the beginning, because I feel if I can gel with those albums more, then the later stuff is going to make sense. And I'm not forcing myself to listen to it. I'm just being incredibly patient with it, which is, I think, is necessary sometimes. But I'd say you should only really do that with the greats. And if you still can't get into it, then move on, certainly. and that approach is working for me at the moment. So yeah, and there's a couple of other bands in that old school death metal phase that I've really clicked with, and that's like Dismember. They're Swedish, a lot like Entombed, but of course they're very melodic, extremely melodic, but very dark as well. And of course Death. But Death there's a lot there, and I want to really take my time with them. But yeah, they are surprisingly more accessible than I thought.
I mean, I definitely found, going back to like the late 90s, when I was at university, I definitely found.
How about yourself?
So I definitely found the Scandinavian stuff more accessible in the late 90s. So At the Gates and The Haunted and In Flames, obviously, because like you said, there's a melody there, and I think that's more accessible. Well, I think it's the double whammy with a lot of death metal bands, where you've got the sometimes indecipherable lyrics, the growling, and then the wall of sound that is the guitars, and a lot of people find that impenetrable. So yeah, I mean, are there any other bands that you've been listening to in death metal then on your journey?
Not recently, because I've been trying to focus on that early 90s period and just swim with it as much as I can. I mean, certainly some of the later 90s melodic death stuff, the Scandinavian stuff, I'm more familiar with, but that's because it very much happened once I was embedded into metal as an adult. So there is that familiarity. But I was too young for the original stuff. But the melodic stuff is different, because I think because the amount of melody used and the intent to blend the technical and sonic elements of death metal with the old school harmonies of heavy metal, that almost puts it in a very different field, I think, to the original stuff, which is it's purposefully abrasive.
Yeah,
not to the point that black metal is, but it wants to be that, without being, I suppose, noise a lot of the time, although some bands, yeah, have a different approach.
yeah. I mean, I think as well. One of the reasons I find like some of the Scandinavian stuff accessible is firstly it's a guitar tone, and also the fact that there are solos in a lot of the stuff. So like I like In Flames because there are guitar solos, and I think in a lot of death metal there isn't. So and it's like this, that's a personal preference of mine. So but I think, you know, the thing I think the thing anyone can take away from it is that it's definitely a subgenre of metal that requires a certain level of patience, and you've just got to give it time. I mean, I would love to be more, would have liked to have been more aware of it back when I first started listening, and then maybe I could have taken in some more bands, because I think as well, when you go to places like Wacken, where you'll find more bands who are you classify as being death metal on the stages, seeing it live does add a certain thing to it that you don't get on the record, and then that's also a good way of sucking people in. So, and then also, you know, you're surrounded by people who are into it, you can ask questions and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. It's just it's finding what's right and what clicks. You know, you don't have to be into a particular sound generally, but all you need is that one band sometimes. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the new Gatecreeper album, which comes out next week. What I've heard from it so far surprised me, as how accessible it was. But I saw them at Bloodstock last year, and they did go down well. So yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's just, you know, there's no rush or anything. It's a wonderful world to get into, and I've certainly got all the time to do so.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I saw this week when they're talking about bands playing live is there's a video on online. It's Saxon playing, and Biff Bifford's doing Denim and Leather, and he actually reaches down and borrows a fan's battle jacket, puts it on while he sings Denim and Leather. Then at the end of the song, he signs it, fills the pockets with guitar plectrums, and gives it back to him.
Oh.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I quite like that. That's something I've noticed this week. I mean, what I've been listening to this week is I've come across a band. They've been around a while, but they've had like sporadic releases. The last release was 2017, but they've been going since '98. It's called Solitary. We're a UK thrash band, and I mean, I would recommend anyone going and having to check them out on Spotify. They say in their biography on Spotify that they're influenced by Testament, and you can definitely hear that. So if you like Testament, especially some of Testament's later stuff, definitely check them out. It's just good, solid thrash, solos, good riffs. I like the production, and the vocals are pretty cool as well. You can definitely tell, especially in the vocals, you can hear Chuck Billy's style of delivery, which I thought was quite good. And I mean, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Testament as well. So,
yeah, no, oh yeah, I they're probably my favorite outside of the big four. I would say there's a groove to them that I like, and I think a sort of certain ferociousness.
yeah.
Just blend well.
And they've got, I mean, and Alex Skolnick is a damn good guitar player as well. So you've got that aspect to it. But yeah, so if you like Testament and you like Exodus and you like Overkill, and also you're a fan of the Big Four thrash, Solitary, and check out the album The Truth Behind the Lies. Definitely worth checking out. So because Tregenza is not here, we the two of us thought tonight we'd actually really go into like the depths of the darkness and talk about mental health and heavy metal. So I mean, I've alluded to, and I've discussed on previous episodes, that I've had issues with mental health in the last year. But I mean, I've had on and off issues with things like depression and anxiety going all the way back to easily 2002. I don't really recall having any issues before then, but it was really towards the end of university that I think it really started to gather steam, and that's about 4 or 5, 6 years after I'm getting into metal. So, and I think we were talking earlier before we came on about there's a stereotype that because we listen to heavy metal, we're all miserable and dark and brooding, and we're devil worshippers, and we go around self-harming and things like that. But I think there's been research carried out. There are peer-reviewed journals articles where because of the physicality of going to a heavy metal concert and the exercise that includes, you actually end up lowering your cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. And heavy metal fans are actually genuinely more more comfortable with their emotions, both positive and negative, than other musical fans. And I think, maybe that's because we deal with the darkness in our musical tastes. I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, it's definitely the case, I think. I mean, we could look at all these journals and dissertations and articles all we like, and it's all valuable stuff, because we want to help us. We want to understand each other and our society and our civilization as best we can. I don't believe any kind of strange subject in science someone's came up with and wants to explore the link between something related A to completely even less related B. It's all valuable. But as you said, something about cortisol levels and reaction. I will point out, though, it's not just metal. I think there is something specific about music that you connect with, whatever it is, that releases, I think, certain chemicals and puts you in a state of ease, even if it is the most twee form of country music imaginable. Music is one of the greatest things that we've ever created as a species, and it pains me when I hear some cultures just shun it as being the work of the devil, regardless of what it is. But metal, yeah, I think the key thing about metal seems to be the vibration, doesn't it? Apparently, the vibration connects with the inside of the brain or the earlobe or whatever at a particular frequency, which, if you're susceptible to that frequency, there's a there is dopamine or serotonin or anything, something being released, maybe more. And I'd love to know more about that or understand it, because surely we're all susceptible to that. So why is it that some of us hear a big fucking riff and go, I feel good, and yet other people think, oh no, that's horrible, that's terrible? Is there something just with us where
there's a
that chemical?
Firstly, I think if you look at it from the perspective of the live experience, you go to a gig, whether it's a small gig or it's a massive concert. For usually, well, actually no, more often than not, 99.9% of the time, you're amongst your people, you're in your tribe, and you're surrounded by like-minded people who have similar values to you, either culturally or artistically. So, and most of the time morally as well. Now, I mean, we did an episode over a year ago now. It would have been July 2022, and we were talking about why we got into metal. And one of the things that I read about in preparation for that was the fact that the heavy metal community or subcultures will kind of coalesce and develop based around the fact that people come together and they impose or they create their own set of values that serves as a kind of a gateway into that community. So if you've got those shared values, if you've got the same values, you might be or will inevitably be attracted to that. I don't think it's just the music. Now, I think if you're a 13 or a 14-year-old and you're going through puberty and you're starting to think about yourself and you're more aware of yourself, how your external environment impacts you, how you impact your external environment, and whether or not you feel you have a certain amount of control over how things affect you or how you affect other things, that can form as a basis of why you might want to get into a form of music where people can sing about feeling neglected, feeling isolated, feeling that they need to be part of a certain group. I mean, there are multiple songs by metal bands which talk about being part of the scene. Like I was listening to Bonded by Blood earlier by Exodus. That's a perfect example. Hit the Lights and Whiplash by Metallica are another example. So is Metal Militia. The amount of bands that have got these songs in metal is legion. It's basically you're singing about what matters to the community, what matters to the scene. Like Whiplash is about going out on the road. Bonded by Blood is about being at a gig in the mosh pit, and countless. I mean, Caught in a Mosh by Anthrax is another example. These are all songs about like things that are important to people that inhabit the scene, make up the scene, contribute to the scenes or the community's values and what's regarded as being accepted or not accepted. And I think that can resonate with people and that makes people feel more comfortable. So when you go to a gig, you're surrounded by your people. And I have found that particularly useful doing the job that I do, where I moved to another country. I don't know anyone. This is especially when I was younger, before I was married. And I would find a metal bar and I would go there and I'd have my Slayer t-shirt on or my bandana or my patch jacket, and you go in and no one knows you and you can't really speak the language, but you can at least kind of interact with people on that level because you all like the same music. And then and you're taken in, and you have, therefore you have a safe space and you're surrounded by people that even though you might not have the same level of language proficiency, you can at least communicate, you can have a drink, and you could just it always put me at ease because I know how to behave around these people. Like I know how to behave around my people, and like my levels of social anxiety drop when I'm at a metal gig. I can talk to anyone. I will talk to strangers. I will buy people a beer. I will just be like, "Oh man, you like the same music as I, the same band I do, or we're here to see the same band. This is great. When did you last see them? What's your favorite song? What do you reckon about that guitar solo?" And you just talk and talk and talk. I mean, me and Tregenza had that the first time we went to Wacken, and we're just at the table and we bump into this German guy called Michael. He sat next to us and we spent the entire evening with him and his friends just talking about metal. And when you're in that environment, it brings you together, and that positively impacts your mental health. And I think when people are outside, when metal fans are out there in the world, and I used to do this when I was at university. In fact, my nickname on my course at university was Scary Hooded Metal Guy. Because I used to wear my bandana, my hooded top, and my metal t-shirts, and my black and white camouflage cargo pants, and I had these big steel toe cap boots and stuff, and my skull rings and necklace and everything. And from now looking back, why did I do that? I'm actually thinking, okay, if you're into a form of music which has the propensity to push people away, to keep people at arm's length because you're anxious about mixing with those groups of people, and I'm talking about the people that were into like S Club 7 and Stereophonics and stuff like that. I had absolutely no time for those people, and I want those people to leave me alone. So if I'm wearing my Slayer t-shirt, my bandana, and my hooded top, and I've got like a really neutral, non-smiling look on my face, I'm never going to be bothered by people. It's not going to spike my social anxiety, and I just get left alone. I can kind of blend into the corner at the back. And I think that's why I did it. And I think a lot of metal fans do that as well. You're not wearing your Cradle of Filth t-shirt for pure shock value. It's almost like you've put a hedge, you've built a boundary around yourself, and you're saying, leave me alone. I don't want to interact with you because you're not my people. That's just, that's one of the things I've been thinking about.
That's fascinating. Actually, I've never looked at it from that angle. So I suppose the idea is you're thinking it's effort to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
want to be.
Are you good?
Be fake. So
are you good at small talk?
Me? No, I'm absolutely terrible at it.
I am fucking terrible at it, but I can do small talk like nobody's business when I'm at a metal gig because I've got something to talk about. I think this is my point. I find small talk cringeworthy. Like if you want to sit down with me and have a beer and get weird and nerdy and talk about metal or talk about like big emotions and big feelings and stuff and things that drive you crazy or the dark recesses of your mind, I will sit there and listen to you all night, and I'll be as open with you as you are with me. But if you want to talk about whatever it is people use to do for small talk, I can't do it. I'm shit at it. I'm not interested. I find it boring. And it causes me anxiety because I'll be there at the table thinking, oh my God, I don't know what to say. So if you don't want that interaction, it's best to go around with a fucking Cradle of Filth t-shirt on or an Emperor t-shirt because no one's going to come up to you because they're all going to be put off by you because they go, oh, he's the weirdo. I mean, like, how many times have you been out or someone's described you as like a Marilyn Manson wrist slitting freak? I mean, it's just like, well, I don't self-harm, but if you think I do and that's going to stop you from talking to me, then I'm happy to kind of perpetuate that myth,
That is interesting because obviously you did history
at uni, yeah.
History at uni, and you went to a fairly, I suppose, normal academic university. To do that was was interesting enough. I mean, I know I met Tregenza, and we did a graphic design degree in Epsom. Nearly 25 years ago, for fuck's sake.
I know.
But I was relatively local to that area anyway, just down the road, and I wanted to stay local. And I've just done 8 years at grammar school, so that's an entirely different bloody story, quite frankly. But it's it ended better than it was in the middle. But I wanted a bit of a clean break, and I did a foundation year of art first because I had to do that in order to do graphic design, guaranteed entry, which I fine. But a year just doing art, which I needed that, but I wanted to have a complete break socially. So apart from one friend who I made sure I kept up with contact with, and I'm still bloody good mates with him to this day. It was a completely new kettle of fish, but I didn't want to not be myself. I mean, I didn't have too much in the way of metal gear. I had a Sepultura t-shirt, which I've still got now. I think a couple of Corns and the Deftones. The huge baggy jeans that everyone wore in those days, except you probably.
No, I was
I
cargo pants. I was the I like my camouflage cargo pants.
Yeah, no, I had the fucking huge kecks, didn't I? Proper. And this was 1998, so it was at the time. But I wasn't into. I didn't do the makeup or anything like that. I didn't have ridiculously stupid hair all the time, only sometimes. But I tried to be as positive as I could, and I was myself. I wore metal clothes, but my experiences were different. I think because I probably went to I was doing an artistic degree, and you do get probably maybe a wider degree of people. Now, it's strange because on the second day of that course, I went to the pub twice, once at lunchtime and once afterwards with people like close to me, because we're all just trying to make new friends. And none of them were metal. There were very few of us who were into metal in that course. I think maybe there was a couple of us. There was John, our good friend John, who wasn't so much into the heavy stuff, but he likes the classics, and of course he's still our mate now. But I made friends with him a bit later that year. But yeah, I latched on to people close to me, and we all just sort of got on with each other. And we're all sort of fairly local, but the others were far more sort of trendy and hip than I was. They're all into their sort of sort of garage and hip hop and some sort of pop. But we bonded very quickly, and I think it's because we were in a very, very open environment where it didn't really matter if you were into metal or rock or pop or this or that. We're all weird arty types, and it's weird how it's almost like the polar opposite, because I didn't have that at all. I felt like I was free from judgment for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I think as well. It's actually quite. I think there's a certain almost paradox to it. It's that you can dress up. You can wear what is regarded as being like the heavy metal uniform over the. I mean, I would say for me, a patch jacket is what you wear when you go to gigs or when you're out, maybe in a group or on a pub or something. But I wouldn't necessarily wear a patch jacket to class when I was at university. But I said earlier that I'd put the Slayer t-shirt on or whatever it is. I mean, when I say Slayer t-shirt, I had the Root of All Evil t-shirt with a massive devil on the front and then the virgins being mutilated on the back. So you put that on, and I'm saying I'm going to put that on because everyone's going to look at me and go, "Oh, that's he's weird, and let's not go and talk to him." But at the same time, by doing that, you stand out. It's a weird paradox. Like, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you about it, but I'm going to dress in a way that does attract attention to me. So it's very strange because if you walk into a lecture theatre of 100 students and everyone's got the on my course, very typical blue jeans, some form of polo t-shirt, Adidas trainers, yeah. Girls, jeans, and some kind of like jumper. And in I'd walk into lectures, I'd have my Walkman on, full volume, listening to like some screaming guitar solo. It would usually be something of like Peace Sells or something like that. And people look around because they can hear the music coming out of your ears. And then they just, it's the fucking metal guy again. And I slip into the back, So, and again, like what I think I would do as well. I don't know about you, but does your choice of t-shirt or choice of like heavy metal attire, does it get more kind of controversial or confrontational as your mood darkens? So if you're in like the throes of melancholy, do you go for like, okay, I want the Emperor shirt today? Whereas if you're in a good mood, you're like, I just go for the Black Album t-shirt. What's the hierarchy here of like mood to t-shirt?
I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever really sort of had that kind of approach to things because, Well, a lot of the time it all depends on what bloody t-shirts were available and what my mum had actually washed out. Back in those days, anyway. I mean, certainly, yeah. If I'm feeling, I mean, these days, if I'm feeling a bit more old school, I'll put an Iron Maiden t-shirt or the Wild Hearts Motorhead pastiche, that kind of thing. If I want to rep something a bit newer or flashy, I've got the sort of Carpenter Brook tee, for example, the Hell Ripper. I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't say certainly these days as a man in his 40s that it would be mood based. I mean, I've got a Slayer t-shirt. If I want to, that's it. Fancy a Slayer? I've got that. But I think if anything, to be honest, I think if I'm having a bad day, I'm more likely to not wear anything metal. I think now, which is strange. I'd rather just put on something basic, probably with one of the basic jumpers on, and just almost be normal because I'm just not feeling it. I'll listen to the music, obviously, in the morning and the evening as I normally do, but maybe I'm just not feeling metal. I'm not. It's a bizarre one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think with me, it's. I mean, obviously, when now we're grown up, you've got to put your shirt and trousers and stuff on and go to work. So
I don't.
you kind of it's the music you're listening to on the way into work, or your headphones when you're at work if you're on a break or something. So like when I was like as preparation for today, I was like thinking, is there a list of songs that what are my go-to tracks that I would listen to if I'm like either in the throes of depression or if I'm having an anxious day. And I think there is a difference between being depressed and the music I would listen to there. And when I say depressed, I mean there's this. I mean it in two ways. There's those days where you're just not in a good mood, and then there's the other type, which is and which is what I've had it at periods in my life where you're in a prolonged period where you are in probably the kind of shape where you would need to see a therapist or you need to go on some form of medication and it's like it does affect a lot of things around you. So for me, if I'm like I listen to different music if I'm anxious as opposed to if I'm depressed. And I think as well there's a really good analogy going around for a while now on the internet. There's some really good YouTube videos about depression, and it's a black dog, and the black dog can either be very small or it can be incredibly big. And the black dog is a euphemism or a representation of how you're feeling. And for me, sometimes when that dog is like massive and it's sitting on my lap and it's completely crushing me and it's stopping me from living my life, really doing the things I enjoy. Like for example, like last year there was at least a 6-week period where I wasn't on the pod, and that was probably during one of my really depressive incidents. That was at the peak of my depression. I did go into therapy last year because I wanted to get some coping strategies. And also like at the moment, I'm currently going through the processes of being diagnosed with adult ADHD. So, which has been quite interesting because it explains a lot. And I think as well, when I'm thinking about, I would classify myself as being neurodivergent, and I've got a lot of things that I identify or I represent as. So there's a lot of behaviors that I have that kind of correlate to having ADHD or some kind of disorder there. Plus the fact, I'm also dyslexic and I've got dyscalculia. Yet somehow I've found my way into being an English and history teacher, even though I'm dyslexic. And that can cause some anxiety, to be honest, because again, it's like try telling people that, hey, what do you do? I'm an English teacher. Oh, by the way, I'm also dyslexic. And then the first thing they think about is, hang on, you're dyslexic, you're an English teacher, but dyslexics can't spell. And you're like, well, that's not the whole of dyslexia. Again, it's not like a binary state. Although some dyslexics would actually argue that they're more dyslexic than you. It's like really weird. If you're ever around a number of people who have been formally diagnosed as dyslexic, it almost turns into a pissing contest. Oh, I'm so dyslexic, I can't even remember the number for 999. You know, it's just like that kind of stuff. You know, I can't even spell my own name. You know, okay, well, it's very competitive. It's very similar to being a metal fan. It's very similar to being a metal fan sometimes. Yeah, I can't see. This is the thing, like ADHD. I can't even remember what my original point was because I've gone off on a tangent. This is why we need Tregenza here to saddle me in. Like, you know, I mean, I take the piss out of him, but he is very good at like kind of like what would be the word? Harnessing Padre, I think would be the best way of putting it. But yeah. So when I'm anxious, I listen to music that has got an anger, like an angry tone to it. Like you might be quite surprised at this. You know, I haven't said this before, but one of my top songs that I would listen to in that mood would actually be "Break Stuff" by Limp Bizkit. I actually, for some reason, if I'm having a bad day because I'm anxious and I'm pissed off about having to be at work, or I'm a bit on edge about what might happen at work that day, because I'm thinking about the 100 different scenarios that could happen, then I'm going to listen to something that's got swearing in it, that's basically saying, you know, stay away, motherfucker, or I'm going to fucking lamp you. Like I used to listen to metal at work on my Bluetooth speaker, you know, as a way of signifying that, you know, I'm having a shit day, fuck off. Because it's just easier to do it that way than actually tell people, oh, I need to go and sit in the safe space room because I'm having an anxiety attack. Because it's still difficult to talk about. But yeah, Break Stuff would be one of them. And then I kind of go for the grungy stuff that a lot of Soundgarden and Alice in Chains when I'm in that mood as well. I don't know about you. Do you find the same thing? Yeah. You've got like maybe if you're going towards a more kind of melancholy depression, you're going to listen to something. But if you're going to go the other way, you're going to listen to maybe something that's either more angry or more dark or brooding. Or...
The anger stuff. If I'm in that zone, like bad day at work, people pissing me off, genuine anger for whatever reason, I actually do need to match that with the music. I have found, and that's been the case for years. I certainly, one of the things that helped bring me into metal right after I got into Iron Maiden was Korn. It's a horrendous cliche, but that first album absolutely
no, I don't think it is.
16 years of old.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is a cliche. I think it's completely acceptable. And I think as well, one of the things that Korn did is the influence that they had on metal is that you've gone from the 1980s and the 1970s, people were either singing about drinking or fighting or devil worshipping or demons or things that are elements of reification and disenfranchisement and disenchantment with society, to what they think, okay, this is how I feel. Not this is what I think, but this is how I feel. Or rather than say, well, this is how I feel about something, this is how I feel about myself, and this is what's caused that. And I think that kind of introspective approach to the lyrical writing was a big step forward, and that's what attracted a lot of people. And again, that's why grunge was so popular.
Well, they see it is grunge that did that, wasn't it? Not alternative rock. So yeah, but it's I mean, that was it. That was one of the big things that sucked me in, and certainly 18, 19, maybe in a better state of mind at that point. Slipknot were also a big deal, but I don't want to dwell on like the teenage stuff too much. But I do find as an adult, if I want to be completely full on, it's got to be accessible as well as like full on, because I need that. I need to absorb it quickly. I don't want to work on it. And I think one of my favourites is the City album by Strapping Young Lad.
Right.
For anyone that knows that album, it's just anger. It's just loud. It's just fuck it and fuck it more again. And anyone that knows Devin Townsend, he had his own issues in the 90s. I believe he was sectioned at one point before we went on that massive spree of recording all these different albums in the late 90s. And of course, that album was one of them. But it's just, my God, it's it's 40 minutes, 45 minutes maybe, but
Yeah.
that's it. You're done. You're spent after that. You're almost like in a happy place, because it's an exorcism, that album. It really is.
Yeah. I think you make a good point about it being you need it immediately. Like you need to be able to access it immediately, because going back to what we were saying earlier about death metal, and that, you know, you need to get past that surface level stuff and get into it to appreciate it. I'm not going to go and listen to death metal if I'm in a mood, because why am I listening to music? And for me, it's a trifecta of things. Not now, but if we say this time last year, I'd sat on my balcony and I'd have some form of booze, red wine or beer, my packet of Golden Virginia and my rolling papers, my Bluetooth speaker, and it would be at least 4 or 5 beers and about an hour's worth of metal and just chain smoking. And not that that's actually going to do any good for your cortisol levels or your stress, because smoking actually makes you more stressed, but you do it because you think it makes you less stressed. But it's actually all like it's an all fixation. So I think for more, it's a comfort thing. And it's the same with alcohol. You're trying to numb yourself, but in the long term, it doesn't do any good. It might get you to sleep that night because you're so drunk you pass out. But anyway, if I was on my balcony and I'm anxious about stuff, I'm listening to angry music, I would always go Rage Against the Machine, Know Your Enemy and Wake Up, those 2 songs. I'd also, like I said, I mentioned Limp Bizkit earlier. But in terms of the grungy stuff, like I'd actually go with Serve the Servants, Nutshell by Alice in Chains, and then 2 specific Soundgarden tracks, both off the same album, Head Down and The Day I Try to Live. There's just something about the groove in those songs, especially, just really sits well. And when I say I'll listen to them, I will listen to them 2 or 3 times in a row. And it's just something about those songs one of the problems that I have with my mental health is having ADHD means I hyperfixate on my own thoughts, and I go into this loop where I've got these constant obsessive thoughts, and I'm thinking about the 300 different scenarios that could happen tomorrow, which can trigger my anxiety. Or the other thing that happens is I'm also thinking about that time that thing happened 10 years ago and what would have happened if I had done this. And that makes you depressed. And like, it's the way I was thinking about this earlier today. If you have those kind of problems, but then you're having issues in your life which have then the potential to exacerbate that root thing that you've got, it becomes almost impossible sometimes. And imagine your mental health is like you're looking for something in a cupboard, but the cupboard is full and the thing you want is right at the back, and in order to get to it, you've got to pull everything else out. Pulling everything else out when you're under a lot of stress and you've got lots of external factors which are exacerbating your mental health is particularly difficult. And sometimes listening to music is like tantamount to just shutting the door and just trying to ignore it. Whereas when you're in a situation, and I would say I'm in this kind of situation now, where my cupboard is a lot barer, and the things that I need to work on and find and get at and handle, I can get to straight away, and I don't need to listen to music as a way of keeping the door shut. I can listen to music for its own sake. And then when I do have those kind of intrusive thoughts that I'm triggering back to something that happened ages ago, or like something that happened when I was a kid and it's unresolved trauma, then I'm going to listen to certain music about that too. But I do find it at the moment being in Saudi Arabia, being completely cut off from drugs, booze, cigarettes, because I'm actually, as of today, I'm 9 months no smoke, no cigarettes, no booze.
Nice.
Yeah. So I find it much easier to deal with this stuff. And one of the things that I found being in therapy and talking to people, and then obviously looking at things online, is that by not drinking or smoking or doing drugs or doing any kind of self-destructive behavior, when you have these feelings, when you have these thoughts, you deal with it, you feel it, and you get through it, and without medicating yourself, and that leads to some form of healing. And it's like there's a scene from the film Platoon.
It's been years since I've seen
it.
Yes.
Well, there's a point, and they're out in the desert. Not in the desert, sorry. They're out in the jungle, and the Viet Cong attack them. And one of them gets shot. And Tom Berenger, the sergeant, the guy is like, he's yelling and screaming, and he's been shot. And the Viet Cong are still out there in the jungle. And like, if he's screaming, they're going to find out where they are. So Tom Berenger like puts his hand over their mouth, and he's like, "Take the pain, take the fucking pain." And I think sometimes you've got to do that. You've got to, whatever it is that's causing you trauma or negative thoughts or something, sometimes you've just got to sit there and feel it and think through it and find out what is this echoing back to. And secondly, one thing that I found useful, and I don't know if this relates to you, or you can empathize with this, is you can have a story or a narrative around whatever trauma it is you've got. But unless you unpack the emotion from the narrative and deal with the emotion, then the narrative just perpetuates the emotions, and you never overcome whatever it is that traumatized you. Because you can have the narrative and you can tell people about, oh, this is what happened to me. And I think some people fall into the trap that by telling the story again, every time they tell the story, the trauma that is the foundation of that story is going to be somehow easier to deal with. And I don't think it is. And what I've been doing the last couple of months is unpacking stuff and going back to the things the baggage that I have, and looking at the emotion around it and trying to describe it and trying to write it down. And I mean, I journal quite a lot. I find that really useful in terms of maintaining my mental health. And again, I'll listen to that when I'm doing that. I'll be listening to Slayer and Emperor and Death and like really dark, aggressive stuff. And I just find it really cathartic. What about you? Do you have, can you kind of like see what I'm getting at there with you've got to separate the things?
I can. I think my feelings on that might be quite different, but in the same way, it sort of ends up propping up your approach to doing it now when you're doing better. I've always probably had poor mental health all my life, up and down, usual thing, depending on what's going on in life. But it's probably lifelong. And it all culminated in 2021, second year of COVID, after months of isolation and other things. But things went very wrong, and I let myself fall very, very quickly. And whilst it led to me having to, deal with things and getting some professional mental help, which allowed me to learn a few things and realize a few things and work on that, and try and do more positive stuff. This podcast for one. One of the problems during that dark period was that I let myself focus on everything negative throughout my entire life. So if you can imagine, every bad thing you've ever done, every bad thing you've ever said, whether malicious or just dumb or stupid, but every negative thing is all packed into this one giant trunk in the corner of the room. And of course, you put things in through the keyhole every now and again. But
it's Pandora's box.
It's festering. Pandora's box.
It's Pandora's box, and you know what's in there, but for God's sake, don't open it.
Yeah. Well, I basically opened it, and let's just say I was very, very close to doing something final. But literally this is it. Everything bad just opened up, and also how I looked at my life as a complete failure because I hadn't fulfilled it, my true potential. I thought you could have done so much better in life. and you didn't. You for whatever reason, that's how I felt. I mean, I could argue with people about whether that's true or justified or not. And I think the kind of society we live in at the moment doesn't help thinking like that, because we're all under pressure to be magnificent constantly. And I've realised that was wrong, and I think almost glad I've gone down. But it's
the word
you've got to.
So the word that, if I just ask you a question, the word that comes to my mind, and I can empathise with what you're saying, is, you know, looking back and you're looking at the what ifs, the counterfactual, that the what your life could have been. I think the word that springs to my mind, the feeling I get is it's expectation. It's these unrealistic expectations either people have of us, that we have of people, or that we have of ourselves. So a lot of my emotional baggage in terms of like my rage, my anger, is directed at partly myself for what I think I should have done when I was younger or should have achieved, but also at other people for when you're realizing that you were not supportive and you should have been, and that was your responsibility to me, and you let me down. And how do I get closure on that? And that's something that I've struggled with. How do I get closure on this? How do I move on from this? From like wanting to blame people sorry, just to wrap this up, the biggest problem that I have is you can't find anyone to blame. So you blame yourself. And then that's when it gets dangerous, because that's when you spiral. And that's when you look to, how the hell do I stop this from hurting? Where are the drugs? Where's the booze? And when you can't find that, or if that's not working, and you mentioned something about, you know, you almost did something quite stupid. This time last year, I was in exactly the same position. I was down on the beach. We're in the town I lived in, packet of razor blades, 50 ibuprofen. I'd written the letter, I'd left it on the table for my wife to find. She got up in the middle of the night, clocked it in an instant, figured out where I was most likely to be, and literally turned up at the beach, found me in an absolute state. And she was like, you know, this can't happen again, and let's, you know, and that was the rebound for me. And, you know, I don't know if it hadn't been for my wife, I don't know, would I still be here? I'm not sure, you know. And I think, I think the word we need to use is suicide ideation, because there's passive and there's active. And active is basically, I know what I'm going to do, I know how I'm going to do it, I know when I'm going to do it. And passive is just like, passive for me is when you listen to a song like Fade to Black, you know, and it's like, it's talking about the end, and it's talking about, you know, all I see is agony and that kind of stuff. And you're thinking, you're feeling it, but you're not actually you're not planning it. When you start planning something, that's active suicide ideation. And that's when, if you're having that, that's the point you need to ask for help. And you obviously did the right thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you should commend yourself on that. And I think if anyone listening has had that, you should be proud of yourself for being able to pull yourself back from that, because it takes a lot of strength.
Yes, I mean, I realised something at the time, but sad to say, it also affected me physically, which I'm still dealing with, unfortunately. But I'm yeah, there might be a chance out of that. Hopefully, I don't know, but it could well have just have revealed something that was going to happen anyway. But the positive thing here is I'm just getting on with it and working with it and trying to live my life in a way that copes with that stuff. And at the moment, I very much am. I'm sleeping better than I've ever slept before. I'm eating healthily, fairly well. I'm getting regular exercise done, and, you know, there's other positive things happening in my life, and it's just a case of just shifting it. So yeah, maybe that was the point where, and it's a horrendous cliche at this point, but the old phrase, it's always darkest before dawn. And maybe that was the dark point, that autumn 2021. And but it's there's a couple of seagulls having sex on the roof nearby.
It's a sign.
Yeah, it's the classic. Yeah, that's it. Oh Christ, well, it is slow. Recovery is slow. You know, that's something I always say to people. But that's fine. That's, recovery is the most important thing, and it's horrible that I don't think this, but I suppose, if I wasn't here, I can't read comics, I can't listen to music, I can't watch the films I like. All of these things that I've latched onto over the years, to all these passions that have probably stopped me doing other things. I've always wondered, is like, have they contributed to certain things, or are they things that I'm actually managing to engage with? And I think it is the latter. Definitely,
that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. The things that you like, did they stop you from doing something else, or did they contribute to your life in a positive way? I mean, that's that's
the thing. That's the honest truth is, I have to say, I mean, funny enough, in 2021, I hadn't really been. I said it before. I hadn't been into metal for quite some time, so maybe that was a big factor. I hadn't dealt with that process for a while, but
it does beg the question, doesn't it? That so as metal fans, we've got our little our tribe that we can be a part of, and we can go to a concert, we can go to a gig, we can get together with our friends down the metal pub and talk about metal, and we've got our people that we're comfortable with, that we know how to talk to, that we can relate very easily to, and that has a positive effect on your mental health because you feel included, you feel supported. Okay, but at the same time, metal can also be quite isolating when you don't have access to that, and you push yourself further into the like listening to the music as a way of cocooning yourself off from things. And then I think there's two ways of looking at it. Either it makes you worse, or, as from what I've read on some articles and things recently, that metal fans, the music, because it deals with things like suicide ideation, sexual abuse, self-harm, X, Y, and Z. Because our music surrounds us with those ideas, we're more comfortable discussing them. And I think importantly, for me as well, listening to heavy metal music over the years has helped me have a vocabulary in which to talk about it. And that's the problem, I think, with mental health, is people don't have the vocabulary to express in a way that's not alarmist how they're feeling. Like, if you say to someone, I'm suicidal, that sets alarm bells off. If you say to someone, I'm having suicide ideation issues, it doesn't mean that you're suicidal. It means that those thoughts are crossing, and it's a much more rounded, less dramatic way of saying I need help. But maybe people don't know that term. I didn't know that term until I started reading into it and started going into therapy and talking to a therapist and saying, look, I'm having issues with this stuff. And even then, it's really, really difficult to tell someone that you're thinking of doing this. It's horrible. And I think as well, you've got to be so careful with who you discuss this with, because it can be a massive burden for someone to hear. And you have to get consent first. You can't just blurt out, I'm going to kill myself. You can't be so blasé with these kind of terms and these kind of mental states. So you've got to say, look, I need to talk to you about something. It might be very difficult for you to hear. I've been depressed recently, and I can't see any way out of it. And I'm actually thinking, I've had thoughts recently where I've pictured ending my life, and I'd like to talk about it because I'm worried. That might be a better way of saying, rather than being like, yeah, I'm suicidal. It's like, but if you don't have the vocabulary, what else can you do? Most people are going to internalize that, and it makes it worse. And I think a lot of people are going to use, metal fans would use metal as well. One way I can deal with this is I'm going to go to the show, and I'm going to go in the pit, and I'm going to try and pummel as many people in a friendly way as I possibly can and get some of that angst out and get some of that. And then also you've got the aspect of going into the mosh pit for like half an hour is a damn good cardio workout. It's gonna release some endorphins. It's going to have some residual effect that's probably going to make you feel better. And also it's going to make you, I think as well, when you're in a scene with your people, it gives you some semblance of control and value and self-worth. And that is also useful.
I think we've always lived in societies where, I mean, especially in Britain, the whole stiff upper lip thing is such a big deal, isn't it? We don't talk about feelings, we don't talk about emotions, even if they're slightly negative. It's we're all dealing with shit, so we should all just suck it up and get on with it.
Yeah, I know, and
it's harmful.
It is, and the other thing as well is that a lot of people would say, no, you need to control your emotions. And that's the wrong way of looking at it. You need to control your reaction to your emotions. And sometimes, and I tell one of the problems I have, ADHD sufferers have really bad problems with emotional regularity. And, those of you that know me will know that I have problems with my temper, and which is bad when you're a teacher, because if I have a very, very low tolerance to frustration levels. So again, going back to my analogy of the cupboard, if my cupboard is full of crap, if I've got external stresses in my life, job, money, other low levels anxieties, or if I'm just having a really shit time at work, which is one of the problems I was having last year, when I actually went to my employer and I said, I'm having mental health issues, I'm in therapy. I even told them about the suicide ideation, and they said that my expectations of support were unrealistic and that my mental health was not their problem. Now, when you're in that situation, you're like, what the fuck do I do? I'm lucky. I could come on the podcast and I'd have my creative outlet here, and I've got a very supportive wife, and I've got some other friends that were very supportive too, and fair play, although I can't stand him, but Tregenza was one of them. You need some support sometimes, and I've completely lost my train of thought there. So you've got to sorry, what was I talking about again? Do you know what I mean? It's like, the moment you get diagnosed with ADHD, you become aware of the fact that you can't you can't maintain a coherent train of thought.
I think just being open about what you're feeling, dealing with your emotions, reacting to your emotions, that kind of thing, and whatnot.
That was it. Yeah, control. Yeah, you control your reaction to the emotion. So, for example, you're in a meeting at work and you're being criticized, and it triggers your fight or flight response. And if you go into fight, you're going to tell your boss to fuck off, right? So we're looked down upon if we say, I'm very sorry, can I just take 1 minute to go outside and come back into this meeting? And this is the thing. Why is that fight or flight response being triggered? Because of some unresolved childhood trauma or pre-existing trauma that you might have. And that tone of voice or that specific criticism is triggering something. And at that moment, what's happening, and this is, again, something I've thought about and I've seen and I've discussed with therapists, is that your inner child is reacting, not the adult that you are, and therefore you're never going to be able to really deal with that, control your emotions at that point. So you need to step out and come back in and be like, right, we can continue. And I think going back to types of therapy, if people are interested in stuff, I think what everyone needs to look at some point in their life is some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, because that's one of those things where you don't have, it's not endless. It's not like, oh, I've got a therapist and I see them every week and that's going to be until I die. Cognitive behavioral therapy is literally like a prescription of medicine. It's like you're going to have 16 sessions of CBT and we're going to give you 16 tools to use so that you know what you're acting on, why you're acting on it, and what you need to do at that split second to be able to either preempt the trigger and deal with it, or if you get triggered, deal with it then. And that's what, and cognitive behavioral therapy literally rewires your brain to deal with stuff like this if you don't have those skills. So, I mean, there's a thing that you can look at. It's called cognitive restructuring, where you've got to look at the difference between the reality of the thing or your perception of the thing, and is perception fact. And you literally look at the thing where you go, right, what happened? Why do I feel like this? And what evidence is there to support my feeling about this and my perception? And if there's no evidence to support it, then you've been triggered by something, and you need to look at the trigger, because there's no, like, you've not been unjustly punished, or you've not been singled out for something, or whatever other things that could, affect you. And I that's the thing from the first time I went into therapy that I found the most useful was the tools, the knowing the signs. Like, one of the things that I found really useful was what I learned about myself was I have linguistic triggers. So if I use the word ridiculous, then I'm cooking and I'm about to have a meltdown about something. So if I hear myself use that word, I then have to go, right, I have to take a step back now. And I have to, because what I did is I called it, like, Padre's triangle of frustration. So number one is, Zen, you're Zen, completely calm. Number 10 is you've just listened to the Motley Crue single, so, like, if I'm using the word ridiculous, I'm on a 7 or a 6. I'm heading towards a 10, which is a meltdown, and I need to take a step back because things are going to get ugly, and I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to say something that I can't take back, or I'm going to behave in a way that's not appropriate for the situation I'm in. So again, it's like cueing into those signals. And I think as well, when we go into fight or flight mode, I think as well, we listen to certain types of music. If I'm in a fight mode, I'm going to listen to something really obnoxious and angry and expletive ridden. And that's like, literally about sticking your fingers up. So I'm going to listen to Rage Against the Machine. If I'm in flight mode, if I'm heading towards like suicide ideation or something, again, going back to my list, one of the songs that I'm going to listen to is, and it's a bit on the nose, but one of my favorite songs is How Will I Laugh Tomorrow by Suicidal Tendencies. And then the other one would be Alter Bridge, Metalingus, which I find is actually quite a good way of reminding myself that I can bounce back. And one of my all-time favorites, because just the middle bit is one of my favorite pieces of music, is Master of Puppets, because for some reason the middle bit just reminds me of just being so grateful and happy that I discovered this band. And it just shoots me back to when I'm like 17, and I'm just like, shit, where's this band been all my life, It kind of gets you to focus on something positive. Do you have any songs like that kind of flip the switch for you and go, I'm positive again, or it shows you that things can get positive?
I don't think in the same way. It's more, I suppose, just more about putting me back into a place where I'm content. And I suppose that's where a lot of childhood favourite music comes into play. The pop music I listened to as a little boy, some of the teenage stuff, even some of the indie stuff before I got into metal. Because I wasn't, I struggled with things when I was at school, and comics and music became the escape. Again, terrible cliche, but I was contented at those times when I was listening to certain bands and reading the comics. I wouldn't say I was happy, but I wasn't unhappy, so to speak. So I think anything from that era, we were talking about a Green Day song, something by the Cranberries, even just a couple of songs from the charts. Spring '94 is a particular fun time for me, because again, that's when I was getting more into guitar music, and that's when I got properly into Marvel. So there's a batch of songs that were in the top 40 in spring '94 that I always latch onto and just kind of give me that pleasure. And I think Under the Bridge was a single at the time by Chili Peppers. Glam Rock Cops by Carter USM, who I mentioned last week. There's a song by The Beautiful South that helps. And it's Conflict Girl by Tori Amos. And it's stuff like that. It's just moments in time. So I get where you're coming from, but it doesn't necessarily have to be metal with me, because it's always been as fluid.
It's interesting that you say that, because for me, one of the ways that I can help like flip the switch, and I came across this, or I kind of found a way of kind of characterizing this about 2 or 3 years ago. I read an article where they did those kind of thinking critical thinking problems or ethical thinking problems where for example there's the man tied on the track and there's the train running towards the man, but the bridge is going to collapse, and you can either save the bridge and save the lives of 50 people, or you can flip the switch and you save the life of the one person. And it's like you have to like discuss which person you would save. Is it the needs of the many or the needs of the few? Yeah. And
I read the trolley problem.
Yeah, the trolley problem. Yeah. And
yeah,
I read this article saying that if you do that, if you discuss that problem with someone who in English, but who's not a native English speaker, they will always go for saving the one person. And I was like, no, that can't be right. So I did it. I actually did it in class with my students in Italy, and they were quite high level. And I said, right, this group of students, this group A, you do it in English. You can only talk about this problem in English. You guys, you can only talk about the problem in Italian, your native language. Now, the idea being this: when you speak in your native language, you're more able to access the emotional parts of your brain. Whereas once you're thinking through a problem in a second language, you have to use different pathways in your brain in different parts of your brain. Therefore, you're going to trigger the more logical, analytical part of your brain. And what came out in terms of, okay, which person would you save? The people that did it in the native language, they all agreed that you would save the 50 people, and the people that did the problem in English all saved the one person. And I was like, that is eerie. That article was bang on. So sometimes what I do is when I'm in a certain mood, if I want to get myself out of that mood and I don't want to have to access that emotional part of my brain, is I listen to opera. Now, I'm not fluent, but I do speak a bit of Italian because I lived there for 5 years. I'm intermediate level. I'm at conversational level, although I do make a lot of mistakes. But I have to think when I'm listening to opera. I have to think because I'm trying to translate some of the lyrics, even songs I know well. So if I listen to like Puccini or Verdi, it snaps me out of it because you're listening to music that's quite emotional, but you're having to use the analytical part of your brain that deals with language and problems because you're listening to something that's not in your own language. So that for me snaps me out of it. And it's not because I listen to opera because I'm a pretentious bastard, even though that's what Tregenza would say. Oh, by the way, Tregenza, Dream Theatre. So and I found that quite interesting, and I have noticed that, and I find listening to classical music in opera and things like that does put me in a better mood. Even like music like for example Ennio Morricone, and you listen to like The Ecstasy of Gold, that works. Invariably, as a metal fan, if you listen to The Ecstasy of Gold, you kind of immediately flick to Metallica because it's their intro. Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, and I think it does work.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend listening to the score to John Carpenter's The Thing that Morricone did because that's quite bleak.
Yeah.
It makes sense because when I was recovering, trying to get myself out of things, and before I started doing this podcast, I never listened to podcasts previously because I always had my music. Right, that's it. And I actually made a point of listening to podcasts because I thought I need to control my thinking. I need to stop myself from despairing and ruminating, etc., etc. And I can still do those things even if I'm listening to music because it's background now. Whether it's the heavy stuff or the soft stuff, it's background. I need to actually give myself something to focus on, which is what podcasts did. So initially it was just comic book stuff, a couple of metal things, and then this came along, and of course I made a point of listening to them each week until I got sick of our voices. So no, that all makes perfect sense. You're giving yourself something to focus on specifically.
That's quite interesting because, like, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a guitar player anymore. I used to play the guitar badly. I had my BC Rich Warlock and my PV amp, and when I became an English language teacher and moved abroad, I couldn't take it with me. So I could only really get access to it when I came home. And then once I moved to Asia, you're not coming home every year like I used to when I was working in Europe because of the distance. And I kind of drifted away from playing the guitar. And I do remember, again, sitting here now, thinking back to when I was 21 or 19 or 24, when I had access to my guitar, so being able to sit down and like bang out like a Slayer song on my guitar and like aggressively play it, that also had a really positive effect on my mental health. And not having that in the last 10 or 12 years is really, I think, or I'm only realizing it now, had a negative effect as well. So again, I think having some kind of creative output, you can go to the gym and do some physical exercise, and that, or go for a run or go swimming, and that all works good. And I mean, I think not everyone's going to have the chance to do it, but cold water swimming is really good for your mental health. But yeah, also playing the drums, playing the bass, singing, playing the guitar, that works really well. Maybe even for you, is it like drawing? Do you find that like meditative and it gets your mind off it?
It's mostly yes, which is weird because I haven't actually drawn for quite a while because I've been focusing on other things in life. I'm in a bit of a weird zone. In an interim period before I sort of move on and settle down, in which case, yes, I'm going to be fully releasing myself back into my artwork. But at the moment, I'm not in the zone. But it's something, I suppose, yeah, when you're good at something, which I am, you've got to kind of make yourself, because it does help. Just making the time to actually do something as well as you can, it does make you feel good about yourself. The trouble is you need to do a lot of them, because you do a good piece of work, that's good. It's quickly over that good feeling. So you need to keep up that momentum, I think, with something like art. And do several good pieces over at once in order to get the benefits. And that's a much bigger challenge and something I'm probably not disciplined myself to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that, just to wrap up, I mean, I think, you know, the music that we listen to, the scene that we're in, the subculture, you know, our tribe of people, all positively contribute to maintaining a good level of mental health. And I think as well, especially, it provides some form of support network for when we do hit those really low points, of when we crater, and it can help people bounce back. And I think as well, when I've been at gigs and you've seen people and they've been self-harming for whatever reason, no one bats an eyelid. And I think that's what I think that's a testament to how accepting the community is when it's at its best. And that's one of the reasons I love it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so, invested in it. And another reason why we do the podcast, it's not just about the music, it's about the community of people. Like, I've very rarely met someone that likes metal that I don't like. There are some knobheads, but I'm probably one of them. But and again, Tregenza would probably agree. Anyway, but I think, any last words?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what you said about CBT earlier, and I don't mean cock and ball torture. But yeah, it's something I did for sessions through the NHS, and while it is a bit of a quick fix as far as they're concerned, I'll give them CBT. It did help with me, even though I needed something. I needed other things down the line, but it did keep me going, and it is worth doing. Even if you get one of those, there's God knows how many books out there, and some of the things they talk about in there, they're always worth doing. But I will stress to people, anything like that, you got to take care of your own health, because your mental health is intrinsically attached to your physical health. If you can't, maybe I'm generalizing here, but I don't think your mental health can be as positive as you want it to be if your physical health is being let down. And I don't mean like if you're disabled or anything like
No,
that.
you're right. Yeah, you're not going to be. Your mental health is not going to be good if you're eating McDonald's every day or you're filling yourself with junk.
No.
Fresh fruit, vegetables, fresh food, fresh air, of exercise, and there is absolutely no shame in going to someone to talk for 4, 5, 6, 10 hours, and I will set or 12 hours or whatever, however long it needs, whether it's NHS or private. And this is the last thing I want to say is there is absolutely no shame in going to a therapist and talking. And therapy is never what you think it's going to be. It's completely different. Forget what you see in the movies. It's not that. It's not Silence of the Lambs. It's not Good Will Hunting. It's not whatever crap you see on TV. It's completely different. And the last thing is this: therapy is like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you only bench press 2 kilos, you're never going to build muscle. If you go to a therapist and you don't do the work outside of the sessions, which means thinking and acting on the stuff that you do in the sessions, you'll never get better, and you're paying a lot of money for something that's going to have no effect long term and only some residual effect. So you've got to put the work in, and you've got to be open, and you've got to be honest. And if you don't like your therapist, if you do go into therapy, there is absolutely no shame in after 1 or 2 sessions saying, I'm not vibing with you and I'm going to try someone else. They won't get offended, and it will be good for you as well. And I think, hopefully everyone's got good mental health. And if not, put some Slayer on. And that's us for this week. So thanks for tuning in. Next time, Tregenza will be back and the Reign of Terror will resume. Hopefully we'll get the chance to do this again at some point. And thanks for listening. And if you are having mental health issues, if you do want someone to talk about, hit me up on Instagram at Padre in the Abyss on Instagram. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, and we're here as a community to support each other. This has been something that's quite important to me. I've actually found this episode to be quite cathartic. I hope there's some gems of wisdom in there for anyone that's suffering. And if you are suffering, get support, get help. At Padre in the Abyss, I'm happy to help, even if I want to point you in the way of a therapist. So thank you very much for tuning in, and stay metal.